Hi, I'm Caitlin, and this is Laura.
Hello.
And this is Book Chats, and today we are actually chatting about books because there are two of us.
Yay!
So Laura is one of my best friends,
Love.
and we actually bonded over reading, among other things. I was hanging out with her for the holidays, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about a subject that I think is a subject that people debate in the kind of book world all the time, and we actually kind of differ in our approach to, and that is rereading. So Laura is a rereader.
All the time.
And I almost never reread things, and so I just want to talk about that. So Laura, why do you reread? What do you get out of rereading?
Well, first of all, the whole topic came up because Goodreads has this great annual reading challenge. And I set my goal of 25 books, 2 a month. I was like, no problem, I can do that. I easily read that much a month.
And then in November, I was looking at it and I was like, Laura, your goal is only 25. You read 25 books this year, right?
And I had only read 11 or 12 was on my list so far. And she's like, how have you only read this many books? And I was like, I've actually read way more than that. But I was only counting books that were new on my challenge, not books I had reread. And when I went back and looked at what I had read this year, I had reread a lot of books. And so for me, I really enjoy looking at a story again after reading it again, or it's just like a movie or a TV series you've already seen, and yet you want to see it again because there's certain parts you really like, or certain emotions that you really connect with, or storylines that really mean something to you, and so you go and watch it again because you want to relive all the emotion and the enjoyment and the fun or the fear, whatever it was, again. And for me, reading's the same way. I love the stories, and when it's a story that I really like, I want to read it again. I want to experience it again. And it's really interesting because I read really fast, and I tend to, the first time I read a book, I'm just trying to finish it. I want to know what happens next. I want to get to that part that I'm looking for, that thing that I've guessed, and I want to see if I'm right. And so I tend to skip over the details a lot, or not notice the details. And so when I reread, then I can pick up on things that I missed the first time, things that, that's really cool, or that makes a lot of sense, or, I didn't see that, and really appreciate the story as a whole, knowing what's coming, and appreciate the details a little more than I did the first time when I was just trying to get through it. So
yeah. And I don't really reread that much because I feel like I don't have time to reread because I have a really, really huge TBR, and if I'm rereading, I'm not reading new things off of that list, and so I feel this pressure that I have to always be reading new things, and I actually don't read as fast as Laura the first time through a book. I read faster than maybe your average American, but your average reader, I think I actually read a little slower. I definitely read slower than some of the really fast readers out there on Goodreads or on BookTube. And so I know I read a lot of books in a month, but in general, I kind of tend to read slower.
That's just because she's constantly reading.
Yeah, I have no hobbies. I work and I read, and I listen to audiobooks sometimes while I'm working. If I'm rereading, I feel like I'm missing out on things that are new in general, and I tend to remember things more. So I know something you do that I don't do in general is if you're reading the second or third book in a series, you'll often reread the first one because it's been a year.
Yeah, I can't go, if it's a series that I've been waiting for the new book forever. So for instance, Serafina, Shadow Scale came out this year, the second book, and I hadn't read Serafina for almost 2 years, over 2 years. And so there were little parts, I remember the general story, and I remember I really liked it, but I knew that I was going to be really lost if I just jumped into reading the sequel. So I had to read the first book again. And that happens all the time. If it's a new book, I'm like, well, I don't remember what happened in book 2, so I need to reread so I'm not lost or I'm not missing things. So I usually start from the very beginning, which it's like a new book comes out and I really want to read it, but I've got to read 4 books first.
Yeah.
Which is kind of annoying sometimes, but I process.
Definitely something that I've realized, I know next year you said you wanted to reread maybe a little less.
Yeah, but I always say that, and then it's like, I haven't read this book in so long. I really like this book, and then I'll just sit down and read it, and then usually it's a series, and so then of course you have to read all of them. I already have got a list in my head of the books I want to reread this year. I'm going to start at the beginning and reread all the Harry Potters. I haven't read those in 4 or 5 years. It's been a while. So it's time to reread. There's a couple Altered and Erased. I want to read those again so I can read the companions that have come out because I haven't read those yet. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I say I'm not going to, but I'm going to.
And I actually have a couple books that I want to reread next year because this past year I really had to confront the fact that I almost didn't make my reading goal, and I went into this panic and I started reading shorter books, and I just didn't really like the attitude that having a higher and higher reading goal every year had brought me to this place where I wasn't reading to enjoy, and I was avoiding kind of longer, more challenging books, and I wasn't rereading things when I wanted to reread them because I felt like it just always had to be a new book. And so next year I set a much lower goal, and my goal is kind of to read longer books and to reread a couple because there's a couple books I really miss. So
well, and there's like 4 series where there's one book left that she hasn't read yet, and I have, and I'm just dying to talk to her about them. Series that she got me into, and I finished first, and now I'm like, you need to finish so we can talk about it. But she has to reread.
Before we're done, I just want from you maybe a recommendation of your favorite books to reread.
Oh, goodness.
Or series. You can lump a series together.
So I am a feel-good, happy ending person, and there are no books that have better feel-good, happy endings than Christian romance, historical romance. They always have such happy endings. And so even if the book is so cheesy and I've read it 100 times, When Calls the Heart is one of the series. When I just need something to make me happy, I'll sit down and read those. And they're so short, I can knock them out in a day and it's no big deal. So that's a good one. All those YAs. It's hard to nail down one. Yeah, I pick a good YA series that I reread every year. This year's Harry Potter, and like I said,
which you might listen to an audiobook.
Yeah, Caitlin and I always talked about how I could never do audiobooks. They'd put me to sleep in about 5 minutes, and I'd say, turn it off. I'm gonna fall asleep. I'm trying to drive.
Whereas you guys know I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
And I tried an experiment of instead of listening to a new audiobook to listen to something that I'd already read before, and it actually worked out really well because I was anticipating parts that were coming, looking forward to, this section, how are they going to do it? And so it actually engaged me a lot more. So I've got a really long road trip coming up the next couple days, and so I'm going to start with The Sorcerer's Stone and see how that goes.
And then a couple books that I'm going to reread in 2016. I already know I'm going to reread Bone Gap. I mentioned this in my top 5 books of the year. I wanted to reread this in December, even though I read it in November because I loved it so much. It's really well written, and it's really got a lot of stuff to talk about, and it's beautiful on audio, so I think I'm going to check it out on audio from the library again. They're just going to be like, this girl just checks this book out on audio every 2 weeks. What? And then I really need to reread Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta. I read it actually a year before it was published half a year before it was published in the US because my school had imported it. College. And I then, of course, didn't read Quintana of Charn or the one between them. I forget what it's called. Anyway, I didn't finish the trilogy, and now it's been so long, I actually feel like I need to go back and get the nuance of Melina's writing. I actually have reread a couple of Melina's books because I really like her writing so much. I do occasionally reread books that are my favorites, but those two are on the top of my list for this coming year, so I can keep going in those series. And then, I don't know, there are a bunch of series I have to finish. I've finished In the Afterlight from the Darkest Minds trilogy.
Very good if you haven't read them.
I have to finish Shadow Scale because we have to have a discussion about the end of Serafina's duet. But I don't think I'm going to reread those books. I think I have enough of a hold on what happened in the first 3, and if I have to, I can always Wikipedia it. But we would love to hear in the comments below, are there any books that you reread? Are you having any plans to reread this coming year? And do you reread a lot or a little? Talk to us below. Thanks, and bye.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Yay!